The emergency klaxons aboard the Stellar Haven research station screamed through the corridors like wounded banshees. Dr. Zainab Malik pressed herself against the bulkhead, her dark eyes scanning the flickering emergency lights that cast eerie shadows down the main thoroughfare. Beside her, communications officer Alex Chen's fingers danced across his portable scanner, tracking the biosignatures that had sent the entire station into panic mode. 3 juvenile Catharan signatures, Alex whispered, his voice barely audible, over the alarms. They're moving through the residential sectors. Zainab's breath caught in her throat. Catharan cubs, the offspring of the galaxy's most feared apex predators. Adult Catharans stood nearly 3 meters tall, possessed razor-sharp claws that could slice through reinforced steel, and had never been known to show mercy to any species that threatened their young. The fact that 3 cubs had somehow breached the station's security meant their parents couldn't be far behind. How did they even get aboard? Zainab asked, checking her emergency medical kit. As the station's chief xenobiologist, she knew more about Catharan physiology than anyone else on the crew, but that knowledge felt woefully inadequate in the face of actual contact. Unknown, Alex replied, his scanner beeping frantically. But they're heading toward the human quarters, section C7. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Of all the species aboard the Stellar Haven, the logical Zentorans, the militaristic Corvani, the technologically superior Helix, the cubs were heading straight for the humans. The species most of the galaxy considered primitive, emotional, and largely harmless. They moved carefully through the corridors following the tracker signatures. Other crew members had barricaded themselves in their quarters, following standard protocol for a Catharan incursion. The station's automated defenses had been disabled. No one wanted to risk harming the cubs and invoking the wrath of their parents. As they approached Section C7, the alarm suddenly fell silent. The abrupt quiet was more unsettling than the screaming sirens had been. Alex's scanner showed the 3 biosignatures had stopped moving, clustered together in one of the human residential units. That's Engineer Rodriguez's quarters, Zainab murmured, recognizing the room number. They crept closer, expecting to find the worst. Catharan cubs, while smaller than adults, were still formidable predators. Their instincts were just as sharp, their claws just as deadly. What they found when Alex carefully overrode the door lock defied every piece of conventional wisdom about one of the galaxy's most dangerous species. The door slid open to reveal Engineer Carlos Rodriguez, sitting cross-legged on his bed, his back against the wall. Curled up on his chest and lap were 3 Catharan cubs, each about the size of a large dog but covered in the distinctive silver-blue fur of their species. They were fast asleep, their small chests rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. One cub had its tiny clawed hand resting on Rodriguez's arm, while another was curled up with its head tucked under his chin. Rodriguez looked up as they entered, his finger pressed to his lips in the universal gesture for quiet. His expression was a mixture of wonder and gentle protectiveness that Zainab had never seen before. "How?" she whispered, barely breathing. Rodriguez's voice was soft, careful not to wake his unlikely companions. "They came scratching at my door about an hour ago. They seemed scared, lost. I couldn't just leave them in the corridor." Alex's scanner confirmed what they were seeing. The cubs' biosignatures showed they were in a deep, restful sleep. No stress indicators, no signs of distress or aggression. Just 3 baby predators sleeping peacefully on a human they had never met before. "They were hungry," Rodriguez continued, gesturing toward 3 empty bowls on his desk. "I gave them some of my emergency rations. They ate a little, then just climbed up here and fell asleep." It was then that Zainab began to understand something that would change xenobiological research forever. She had studied Catharan behavior for years, analyzing their social structures, their pack mentalities, their fierce protective instincts. But she had never considered that those same instincts might recognize something familiar in humans, something that transcended species boundaries. "They trust you," she said, the realization hitting her like a revelation. Catharan cubs have an instinctual ability to recognize safe individuals. They're drawn to those who exhibit parental behaviors: warmth, protection, nurturing. Alex lowered his scanner, understanding dawning on his face. And humans. Humans instinctively care for young creatures in distress. Zainab finished. It's hardwired into our psychology. We can't help but respond to something small and vulnerable, even if it belongs to a species that could kill us. The soft hum of the station's systems was interrupted by a new sound, a deep, resonant call that seemed to vibrate through the bulkheads themselves. The cubs stirred slightly but didn't wake, instinctively sensing they were safe. That's the parent, Alex said unnecessarily. Rodriguez tensed, but the cub's continued peaceful sleep seemed to give him strength. What do I do? Before Zainab could answer, the station's intercom crackled to life. Captain Vega's voice, usually steady and commanding, carried a note of barely controlled amazement. All crew, this is the captain. We have been contacted by a Catharan matriarch. She is requesting permission to come aboard and retrieve her cubs. She has assured us that no harm will come to any crew member, and she specifically requests to meet the human who has been caring for her offspring. Rodriguez looked down at the sleeping cubs, his expression softening further. One of them had started purring, a sound like distant thunder. I guess they're not so different from us after all, he murmured. As if in response to his words, the cub under his chin nuzzled closer, its purring growing louder. In that moment, surrounded by 3 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators sleeping trustingly on his chest, Engineer Carlos Rodriguez had accidentally accomplished what decades of diplomatic efforts had failed to achieve. He had shown the galaxy that sometimes the most profound connections happen not through treaties or negotiations, but through simple acts of kindness toward the vulnerable, regardless of what species they happen to be. The emergency was over, but the real story was just beginning.